Two guys, same age, same city, same $50,000 saved. One buys a rental property, one puts it all in index funds. 20 years later, research shows they end up in a surprisingly similar place, around $500,000 in total net worth. But the journey looks nothing alike. One of them worked every weekend for 2 decades, coordinated repairs on his lunch break, navigated the legal process when a tenant stopped paying rent. The other one did absolutely nothing. And here's what studies on long-term wealth building consistently show. For people specifically in the retirement planning phase of life, these two paths are not interchangeable. The differences go far beyond the final number. Today we're walking through what the research and real-world data actually look like. Not the headline math, not the social media version, the full picture, including everything that typically comes out of pocket over 20 years. This is an educational breakdown. Let's get into it. To illustrate this comparison, let's look at 2 hypothetical investors, a common framework used in personal finance education. Meet Jake and Marcus, both 45 years old, both earning $55,000 a year, both holding $50,000 in savings and evaluating their options as they think about the decades ahead. Jake uses it as a 20% down payment on a $250,000 rental property, a modest 3-bedroom in a stable neighborhood, 30-year mortgage at 7%, monthly payment $1,330. He finds a tenant at $1,800 a month. On paper, that's $470 a month in positive cash flow. The numbers look compelling. Marcus takes the same $50,000 and allocates it to a total market index fund. He sets up a $300 automatic monthly contribution and doesn't adjust it. His coworkers ask what he's investing in. He says, index funds. They nod and change the subject. Nobody's particularly impressed. Day 1, Jake has a physical asset, a tenant, and a clear story. Marcus has a brokerage account and a confirmation email. In terms of how it feels, it's not close. But as personal finance research consistently shows, emotional satisfaction and long-term financial outcomes are 2 very different measurements. For the first few years, Jake experiences what many new landlords describe as the early-stage optimism phase. Rent arrives monthly. He passes the property on the way to work. He's accessing mortgage interest deductions. Equity is building. Neighborhood values are moving upward. Everything about the investment feels real, tangible, and productive. Marcus logs into his brokerage once a quarter. The number moves up a little, down a little, up a little more. Year 1, approximately $55,000. Year 2, around $61,000. There's no physical asset, no key, no visible proof of progress, just a number on a screen. Now let's look at what the actual numbers show for Jake through year 3. Gross rent collected, $64,800. Total mortgage payments, $47,880. Gross cash flow on paper, $16,920. This is where the educational value of this comparison becomes clear. Because once researchers and real estate analysts factor in typical operating costs, the picture shifts significantly. Property taxes, approximately $3,000 per year. Insurance, $1,500. Water heater replacement, $1,200. Roof repair, $2,800. 1 month of vacancy plus turnover costs, $2,400. And Jake is self-managing, which real estate educators often describe as an invisible labor cost that rarely appears in beginner projections. After accounting for these real-world expenses, studies suggest actual net cash flow over 3 years in this scenario falls somewhere between $2,000 and $4,000, not $16,920. Marcus, over the same period, holds approximately $76,000, 0 management hours, 0 coordination calls, 0 unexpected repair bills. This is the section that rarely makes it into real estate investment content, but it's where financial educators spend most of their time. Vacancy. Industry data suggests rental properties sit unoccupied roughly 1 month per year on average. During that period, mortgage payments continue with no rental income to offset them. Turnover also generates cleaning, listing, and screening costs. Maintenance. Standard real estate financial modeling recommends budgeting 1 to 2% of property value annually for upkeep. On a $250,000 property, that's $2,500 to $5,000 per year. In some years, costs are minimal. In others, a single systems failure, HVAC, plumbing, roofing, can consume multiple months of cash flow. Capital expenditures, roofing systems, HVAC units, water heaters, and appliances all carry finite lifespans. Financial planning frameworks for real estate investors treat these as predictable future liabilities, not surprises. Investors who don't reserve for them consistently face cash flow disruptions. Property management fees. Professional management typically runs 8 to 10% of monthly rent. Self-management eliminates that fee but introduces a time cost that financial literacy researchers increasingly recognize as a real economic factor. And there's a risk category that real estate investing courses often underemphasize. Tenant non-payment situations, when combined with local eviction timelines and legal costs, can eliminate several months of net income in a single event. Long-term financial planning models for landlords typically include this as a probability-weighted risk factor. None of these variables appear in basic cash-on-cash return calculations, but they all appear in the actual bank account eventually. Quick pause. If this kind of behind-the-numbers financial education is useful to you, subscribe. Every week we break down the research and real-world data behind retirement planning decisions that actually affect long-term outcomes. Now let's look at where both investors land at year 10 and year 20. At year 10, Jake's property has appreciated to approximately $335,000 to $350,000. Remaining mortgage balance, around $166,000. Estimated equity, $170,000 to $184,000. But financial modeling that incorporates cumulative real costs, mortgage interest, taxes, insurance, maintenance, vacancy, and capital expenditures suggests Jake's total out-of-pocket beyond the down payment lands somewhere between $20,000 and $35,000 over that decade. Marcus, with consistent $300 monthly contributions and historical market returns averaging approximately 10% annually, holds an estimated $165,000 to $180,000. Total contributed capital, $86,000. The remainder reflects compound growth. At this stage, they're in a similar range, with Jake holding a slight advantage from leverage. The difference is in the inputs. Jake managed a physical asset, carried significant debt, and concentrated capital in a single geographic location. Marcus added diversified exposure across thousands of companies and made no active decisions. Now, year 20. Jake's property, estimated $450,000 to $500,000 in value, mortgage nearly retired, total equity in the $400,000 to $500,000 range, net cash flow above total expenses over the full period, approximately $40,000 to $80,000. Marcus, over the same 20 years with the same return assumptions and monthly contributions, holds approximately $420,000 to $460,000. Total contributions, $122,000. The remaining $300,000 plus reflects compounding over time. No debt carried, no asset management required. Total net worth at year 20, broadly comparable for both investors. But the inputs, risks, and experiences over those 20 years differ significantly. As financial educators summarize it, Jake built wealth through active management. Marcus built wealth through patience and time. This is where the educational comparison becomes most relevant for people in or approaching retirement. Liquidity is a factor that financial planners consistently identify as underweighted by pre-retirees. In a liquid portfolio, accessing $40,000 typically takes 2 business days. In a real estate portfolio, accessing the same amount requires either a loan against the property, a partial or full sale with associated tax implications, or another financing arrangement. For people navigating fixed income periods, this distinction carries meaningful practical weight. Cash flow distribution also differs structurally. Dividend yields on total market index funds have historically run 1.5% to 2% annually. On a $400,000 portfolio, that produces approximately $6,000 to $8,000 per year in passive distributions, not a replacement for earned income. Rental income, even after accounting for real expenses, can produce $1,000 to $1,500 per month in net cash flow for well-managed properties. For retirees without defined benefit pensions, this income stream carries practical value in retirement budgeting. Tax treatment also differs. Real estate investors have access to depreciation deductions, a non-cash expense that reduces taxable income even when a property is appreciating in value. This is a tax efficiency tool that doesn't exist in standard equity investing outside of retirement accounts. What does the research suggest overall? Neither vehicle dominates across all situations. Real estate outperforms in markets with favorable rent-to-price ratios when managed with business-level rigor, and for investors with sufficient time and capacity for active management. Index fund investing outperforms on simplicity, liquidity, and long-term compounding with minimal friction. Financial planning literature increasingly points to the combination of both as the framework that serves most retirement savers best, with allocation depending on individual circumstances, risk tolerance, and capacity for active management. Jake and Marcus both made their decision based on incomplete information. Neither mapped out the full cost in dollars, in hours, in risk concentration, and in flexibility before committing. The real variable in this comparison isn't real estate versus index funds. The real variable is whether someone ran the complete numbers for their own situation before deciding. Personal finance research consistently shows that the highest returning investment for any individual is the one that matches their actual capacity, timeline, and goals, not the one that performs best in the average scenario. Before arriving at a conclusion on this question, consider one framework question used in financial planning. Did your analysis include everything? Because the version of this comparison that includes everything is the only version worth making a decision from.